Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to catch up with the latest wrangling over the Stormont executive, as the DUP say there's still more to sort out, but the Tories say, no, everything's been agreed, that's it, take it or leave it. Who's going to blink? But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So in terms of the straightforward positions, this is essentially a negotiation between the Conservative Party in London and the DUP in Belfast. Everyone else, including the largest party in Stormont, is essentially a bystander for now. Basically, we've got two groups of Tories playing poker with Northern Ireland. The DUP's position is that there should not be a trade border in the Irish Sea. Naturally, this is not remotely realistic. Not only is there a trade border in the Irish Sea as a result of an international treaty, but the infrastructure work to properly implement it is underway. If the DUP are serious about sticking to this line, then Stormont's never going to sit again, although little caveat towards the end. It's not even like I'm seeing signs that public pressure is being brought to bear on them. Despite the offer of a large financial package, I gather that DUP voters are generally supportive of Donaldson's hard line on this. And that matters because if the DUP were just blocked in by their less compromising members and losing public support, then Chris Heaton-Harris, who's the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, could just call another election. Indeed, we're getting to a point where he's going to have to make a decision about an election. On January the 18th, if Stormont has not assembled, Heaton-Harris has to decide whether to either call fresh elections or delay those elections again. But he has to make a conscious decision. He has so far delayed them on the basis that fresh elections would not actually change anything. And if there are no signs that voters would behave much differently next year, then it may be that that decision to delay has to be taken again. Except this time, it's not like Heaton-Harris can say that it's to give more time for negotiations, because this week it looked like he said the negotiations are done. Everything's been concluded. And there's an extra bit of spice being added next month as well. So the failure to get Stormont running, it's not just argy-bargy between political groups. It's creating a crisis in public services in Northern Ireland. They don't have a government. There seems to be talk of a general strike on January the 18th, the day when Heaton-Harris has to make his decision on fresh elections. And I saw a report in the FT quoting the General Secretary of NIPSA, which is the largest trade union in Northern Ireland, who will be involved in this attempt at general strike. And they said it was to force Heaton-Harris's hand. Now, before I get onto the serious bit here, I'm just going to point out that the idea of a strike in Northern Ireland, even a large one, forcing the hand of a Tory in London is, I'm sorry to say, laughable. Have they not seen how comfortable the Tories have been with massive and protracted public sector strikes in England? The idea that they would spend a second thinking about strikes in a place they couldn't even point to on a blank map is simply not realistic. But let's forget about the folly of that thinking for now. What do NIPSA expect Heaton-Harris to do? Well, there are two powers which he theoretically has. He has the power to call fresh elections. But unless polls suggest that the result would be to diminish the DUP to the point where they can't collapse the executive afterwards, then there's no point. And polls do say we're still going to end up in the same position. So fresh elections wouldn't actually solve anything. You could use them to kick the can down the road, but everyone knows they're not going to change anything. It will look ridiculous. The second is to take control of public services directly. In other words, the government and Westminster do the jobs that Stormont is supposed to be doing. Now, I've said before, this might be a bit of a stick to beat the DUP with. In theory, the DUP would not mind London taking over. In their ideal world, I don't think Stormont even exists. However, due to the power sharing agreement, Dublin would also expect to be involved in decision making. What would actually happen is you'd replace a system whereby Northern Ireland politicians manage public services with one where a joint committee of politicians from London and Dublin did so. Now, there's a sense in which I've thought that it would be quite interesting to see how the DUP would react if Heaton-Harris welcomed representatives appointed by the Irish government to decide public service policy and spending in Northern Ireland and make it clear that this is the DUP's fault and that they have the power to end it any time they choose by reforming the executive. It's such an obvious thing to do. Which would you prefer? To sulk and to allow the Irish government to be managing affairs in Northern Ireland, or do you want to reform the Stormont executive? Such an obvious thing to do that you would normally imagine that surely this is what's going to happen next month, given that other options seem to now be exhausted. Like, the Tories aren't going to get anywhere calling fresh elections. They're not going to reopen talks on the Northern Ireland Protocol. Apart from anything else, the DUP aren't after a little bit more compromise. You know, what they want is the total destruction of the treaty, which is not credible. So why not just go for the nuclear option? Which would you prefer, Sir Geoffrey? That public services in Northern Ireland are managed from Belfast or from Dublin? It's your choice. However, for their own reasons that are potentially, I don't think we're going to see this. Like, the Tories in Westminster wouldn't necessarily want to do this themselves. For a start, some of them are on the DUP side here, and Sunak is trying to reduce opportunities for rebellion. There are also Conservatives who are trying to pick a fight with the Irish government over various issues, non-Brexit issues even. So it might be politically tricky for the Tories to invite Dublin to jointly run the show in Belfast. But I'm not sure I really see any other way to get Stormont operating again. There's a suggestion that the DUP are prepared to just sit this one out, wait for Labour to form a government, and see if their approach of seeking alignment and veterinary deals with the EU naturally removes the need for much of the Brexit infrastructure anyway. Which is hilarious if you think about it. Like, consider the DUP are effectively Northern Ireland's Conservative Party, and they hate the EU. Like, they think it's a papist plot. So imagine that there are suggestions that the DUP strategy could be to wait for a pro-EU Labour government to form, and that they would actively look forward to this Labour government aligning more closely with the hated EU in order to deal with their Brexit problem. Insane politics is not just the preserve of Westminster, you know. But in summary, next month, the Tories have a decision to make. We talk about Chris Heaton-Harris, he's the Secretary of State. In reality, this cannot be a decision that he makes alone because there are so many other tricky issues for the Conservative Party. So this will be decided at cabinet level. Ultimately, Rishi Sunak will have to make this decision. So the Tories have a decision to make collectively. They are likely to know that the DUP have completely trapped themselves, and there's a good chance they are willing to sit this one out indefinitely. So the Tories have the following options. First, they can order more elections. Won't solve anything. Everyone knows it won't solve anything. Second, they can form a joint London and Dublin takeover of public services to manage the basic jobs of the Northern Ireland government if Stormont doesn't reform. You know, say it's the DUP's fault and only they can change it. That would be hilarious. Third, they can try and take over public services directly from London, but without involving Dublin. That would create a massive stink, and I'm not sure it might face legal challenge as well. Fourth, basically do nothing, and like the DUP, wait for Labour to clear up yet another Tory mess. I'm not really sure there are any other options. So all eyes on January the 18th. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.